Oh, that's not so good news because the Statistics Office reports 2 months in a row with a minus, meaning Great Britain is in recession. Only one sector of the economy surprises positively. But that means that the British economy has been in recession since the end of last year, and economists expect the economic crisis to continue for the time being. This makes an imminent change of government in the country even more likely. Given high interest rates and inflation, the British economy slipped into recession at the end of the year, and the gross domestic product shrank by 0.3% from October to December compared to the previous quarter, as the ONS Statistics Office announced in London. In the previous third quarter, it had already fallen by 0.1%. Economists speak of a technical recession if there are two consecutive quarters of shrinking economic output. The loss in the fourth quarter was the largest since the beginning of 2021, when new corona restrictions stalled the economy. Economists surveyed by the Reuters news agency had only expected a decline of 0.1%, not 0.3%, and in 2023 as a whole, there was still a mini growth of 0.1%. The Bank of England expects a slight recovery in 2024. The GDP should then rise by around 0.25%. Many economists, on the other hand, expect the economic crisis to continue. We continue to assume that the United Kingdom will remain in a slight recession over the next 3 quarters. That was written by analysts at a major bank, that's UniCredit. The savings of private households from the corona period have been used up, and the financing costs are high, and the job market is also under pressure. High investment costs slow down the economy, and the main reason for the recession is high inflation still. The inflation rate is currently 4%, twice as high as the central bank's target. This dampens the purchasing power of consumers. In order to reduce inflation, the Bank of England has increased its interest rates sharply. However, this makes investments more expensive, for example, in buildings and in machines. And according to the Statistics Office, industry, construction, and wholesale contributed most to the weak performance in the fourth quarter. As the Statistics Office also announced, economic performance developed weaker in December than in the previous month. A decline of 0.1% was reported for December. In addition, GDP developed somewhat weaker in November than previously known. The increase was revised downwards to just 0.2% after previously reporting an increase of 0.3%. In contrast to other countries such as Germany, monthly data on economic performance is also published in Great Britain. However, the country's industrial production was surprisingly strong. Production rose by 0.6% month on month in December, as the Statistics Office announced, but production is not that important in Britain as services. And for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the economic downturn is a setback in the election year. After all, he had promised to stimulate the economy. And Finance Minister or Chancellor of the Exchequer Jeremy Hunt said the figures were no surprise, but the country would be on the right track as the government will stick to its plan and continue to cut taxes and fight inflation. There are signs that the UK economy is experiencing a U-turn, is what Hunt said. Wages are likely to rise faster than prices in the future, and in addition, taxes on labor and companies must be reduced in order to build a stronger economy. And according to media reports, Hunt wants to save billions in spending in order to be able to finance the tax cuts. And as we all know, Great Britain will elect a new parliament this year, and the opposition Labour Party is well ahead of the Tories in all surveys, and therefore has a good chance of having the next head of government in the future. They criticized the recession as the result of 14 years of chaotic conservative politics. Analysts say British households will suffer a fall in living standards between the elections for the first time since the Second World War, according to the Reuters news agency. Britain's economy is just 1% above its level from the end of 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, and only Germany is doing worse among G7 countries, but that's homemade as well. For the whole of 2023, the economy is broadly stagnant, said McCown, and that's news that's extremely inconvenient for Sunak and his ruling Conservative Party, and especially ahead of the general election. And the British Prime Minister vowed to voters last year to boost the economy as one of his key promises. And his Conservative Party has dominated British politics for the past 7 decades and is known for its economic prowess usually. But according to opinion polls, Labour now enjoys more confidence in the economy. The opposition Labour Party was able to achieve a sensational victory because of that in the by-elections held on Thursday. In Wellingborough, the party won a large majority of votes with 13,844 out of around 18,000, as the British Guardian writes. And according to the newspaper, this is the biggest swing from the Tories to Labour since 1994 and the second biggest since the Second World War. And in Kingswood, the Labour Party easily held its own against the Conservatives and took the seat from the Tories for the first time in 14 years. This is another big blow for the Tories. In total, according to The Guardian, the Conservative government has lost 10 by-elections in a single parliament. That's more than any other government since the 1960s. And this supports the prediction that Labour will win a landslide at the next general election. Polls over the last year have consistently shown that the party could be on the path to victory after 14 years of Conservative leadership. However, Labour is far from winning the election. Labour's lead over the Conservatives had fallen by 7 percentage points to its lowest level since June 23, at least according to a survey by market research firm Savata on Wednesday. And the opposition party had previously removed a green growth spending target from their agenda. And in addition, the party has recently had to repeatedly struggle with accusations of anti-Semitism. And Britain's exit from the European Union has been among the country's most pivotal events in recent times as well. Politicians pushing for Brexit had lofty goals about how much better Britain would fare when it exited the trade union. But it hasn't quite played out that way for their economy. The British economy is now 5% worse off since Brexit, which officially happened about 4 years ago, as it has stalled trade and investment activity in the country. That's at least what Goldman Sachs economists said in a report on Friday. The Brexit referendum took place in 2016, where millions of Brits cast their vote on whether the country should stay or leave the EU. The Goldman Sachs report compares how the UK has fared since that year to similar economies and found that Britain has significantly underperformed its peers. Britain's lackluster performance can be seen in how the UK's economy has flatlined since the COVID-19 pandemic. It's expanded the least since mid-2016 levels, that's 4% in real GDP per capita terms compared to the rest of European regions and the US. And the economist led by Sven Jari-Steen said in their note. The economists use once again the so-called doppelganger approach by comparing post-referendum Britain with a hypothetical one that remained in the EU. A number of factors have slipped lower since the Brexit referendum, hurting the country's overall output. The decision to leave the EU has hurt trade due to higher costs, impacted the business environment as Britain left the EU single market, which created fresh barriers, and has also limited labor supply as immigration from other European countries became, let's say, more restricted. The evidence points to a significant long-run output cost of Brexit, they wrote. The UK economy has notably underperformed other advanced economies since the EU referendum in June 2016, they wrote. To be sure, other events have also shaped Britain's economy in recent times, including pandemic-linked disruptions and the energy crisis spurred by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But Brexit is one that Britain faced alone. The Goldman note aligns with broader findings around Brexit economic repercussions, and economics research group NISA said in a November report that the British economy is performing below baseline estimates in a scenario where it had stayed within the EU, and the impact is set to increase in the coming years. Brexit's poor returns in GDP growth and the term so far adds to pressures that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak faces in jumpstarting the UK economy. Since taking office in 2022, Sunak has spoken about the benefits of a freer Britain following Brexit, but he has faced sky-high inflation and interest rates, which have added to the kind of laundry list of economic pressures weighing on the country. And last year, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, predicted that the UK, which is expected to face general election this year, will clock in the weakest growth among G7 economies in 2024. And official data released later this week will reveal if Britain's economy entered recession, and I mentioned it in the beginning, but we are still waiting for some numbers. On the bright side, Britain is working on non-EU trade deals which could improve overall trading in and out of the country. But most of them are already there and are not very good. It's also the responsibility of the next government to chalk out how future relations with the EU will look, they say. And the trade deals that they wanted, well, they either didn't get them or they did get really bad ones, but not Canada or the USA. Oh, talking about Canada, there was a report recently that the CETA deal, the deal the EU has with Canada, yeah, Britain doesn't have one, but the EU has with Canada, is doing really well. So I'm quite happy that our EU does have a deal with Canada. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.